The sky blushed pink as dawn crept over the horizon, casting long shadows across the dusty ranch. Silas stood by the corral, his weathered hands resting on the rough wood, eyes scanning the land he called home. The air hung heavy with the scent of sweat and earth, the silence palpable. In the pen, Elowen moved gracefully, her pale figure dancing among the horses, her laughter unspoken but resonant in the quiet morning. He watched her, a flicker of warmth igniting in his chest, a feeling he thought long buried alongside the memories of his lost love. But then, just as quickly, the sun climbed higher, casting light on the cold truth. Each moment felt fragile, like glass, and as the first rays hit, Elowen vanished, her presence swallowed by the vastness around him. The ranch fell silent, the weight of unvoiced fears settling in the space between them. The sun's orange glow broke over the Texas plains, illuminating the rickety wooden shack that stood at the edge of town like an old soul, forgotten and weary. Dust swirled around the doorframe, drifting lazily in the morning light, carrying with it the faint scent of desperation that lingered in the air. Within, Elowen sat on the floor, her spine pressed against the cold wood, a ragged shawl wrapped tightly around her thin shoulders. She could hear the low murmur of voices outside, angry and rasping like dry leaves fluttering in the wind. Each word that carried through the thin walls cut deeper than the last, reminding her of the truth she was too afraid to face. Her brother had made the choice for her, the decision spoken through slurred words tinged with whiskey and anger. The moments that led to her fate spun through her mind in disjointed flashes. Her brother's desperate grip on his bottle, the shadows of men looming at the door, and the way they had looked at her as if she were nothing more than a commodity, an object to be bartered away. The world felt heavy, the weight of abandonment both familiar and suffocating. She fisted her hands in the fabric of her shawl, trying to hide the trembling that rippled through her fingers. Outside, Silas perched on the edge of an old wagon wheel, observing the scene unfolding before him. His weathered face bore the lines of hard choices, a man who had lost everything and gained nothing. His eyes, sunken from grief yet fiercely alive, fell upon the girl waiting in the shadows of the porch. There was a quiet strength in her fragility, a haunting beauty wrapped in layers of sorrow. He had come to the town seeking a new beginning, but instead he found himself drawn to the girl, as if her plight echoed the pain he carried within. The moment their gazes met, an unspoken connection flickered in the air, raw and tender. Elowen's pale skin seemed almost luminous against the background of dust and decay. Silas felt as though he could see her soul, a fragile thing encased in fear yet still flickering, alive against the night that threatened to consume her. Her innocence and vulnerability stirred something deep inside him, a yearning he had long buried but could no longer deny. He shifted uncomfortably, his heart beating in sync with the unease that hung between them. Fate pushed him toward her, and as he approached the porch steps, the clamor of jeers and laughter faded like echoes through a canyon. He could almost hear Elowen's heartbeat, thudding a quiet rhythm of dread and longing. She did not flinch as he drew closer, and for a moment the world melted away. The breath of dawn whispered promises they both dared not entertain, connections that felt forbidden in the harsh light of their reality. He reached out, his calloused hand brushing against the edge of her shawl, and she shivered at the warmth of his touch. Silas knew that no matter the outcome of this transaction, she was more than just a girl to him. She was a vessel of hope, a breath of fresh air in a life choked with sorrow. Yet, a bitter ache nestled in his chest, an echo of the vow he had made to himself after losing everything he held dear. He was not in the business of saving others, nor could he afford to fall again. The taste of desolation lingered like ash on his tongue, each choice leading him farther down a path he could neither navigate nor abandon. But when he turned his back on the girl, the weight of his decision sat heavy on his shoulders. The voices outside began to rise again, and the reality of her situation crashed down like a storm. He felt the distance he had cultivated an impermeable barrier crafted from past traumas, snapping taut between them. The warmth of her presence faded, and in the blink of an eye, she was once more just a pale shadow, cloaked in misery and uncertainty. He could not look back, not now, not when his heart urged him to take her hand and run, to save her from the fate that loomed. Elowen's eyes glistened with unshed tears, but she held them back, unwilling to reveal the storm brewing inside. She watched him retreat, every step feeling like a chasm opening wider between them. The hope that had sparked within her dimmed, replaced by a searing ache of abandonment. With each moment that passed, the shackles of her past gripped her tighter, and the dawning realization that she was nothing more than a transaction settled deep in her chest, heavy and cold. As the first rays of dawn scattered across the sky, Silas climbed into his wagon, turning away from the girl and the life he had imagined might have been. The sun rose, yet with it came the reality of separation, leaving behind a silence that screamed louder than any words. Each heartbeat drummed a painful reminder of the distance he had built, and as he pulled away, Elowen slipped even further into the shadows, lost to the light that began to pour over the world. Two souls forever intertwined, yet irrevocably apart. The morning sun pierced through the heavy mist that clung to the ground, the land awakening slowly under its golden touch. Elowen stepped off the rickety wagon and took a tentative breath, air thick with anticipation and uncertainty. The ranch loomed before her, a sprawling expanse of weathered wood and stone, its quiet grandeur almost intimidating. Dust danced in the fading light, swirling around her like lost memories of a life she had just left behind. She clutched the frayed edges of her dress, a pale shadow against the sturdy earth tones of the ranch. Silas stood at the doorway, his silhouette framed against the soft glow of the interior. He was a silent guardian, his rough hands resting against the doorframe, the imprint of hardship etched across his face. She couldn't read the thoughts behind his stoic gaze, only felt the weight of them pressing down on her fragile spirit. They stood like statues in the early morning chill, two souls bound by circumstance, yet separated by the enormity of their unknown futures. "Come in," he finally said, voice low and gravelly, as if the words were carried on the wind from miles away. Elowen took a hesitant step, the wooden floor creaking underfoot like a whispered warning. Inside, the air was warm and musty, filled with the scent of hay and leather, comfort mingling with the harsh reality of her new life. The walls were adorned with tools of a life lived in labor, each item a testament to survival in this rugged terrain. Silas moved aside, allowing her to enter the small kitchen that served as the heart of the home. A simple table dominated the space, its surface scarred with time and toil. A single oil lamp flickered on a shelf, casting dancing shadows that seemed to echo the uncertainty in Elowen's heart. She avoided his gaze as she took a seat, feeling the weight of his presence like a heavy blanket. She was equally comforted and burdened by it. Silence embraced them, thick and palpable, as if the very air held its breath, waiting for the first crack in the tension. Days passed in a blur of muted colors. Each sunrise brought with it a routine that seemed both foreign and comforting. Elowen tended to the chores assigned to her, moving through the motions with a sense of resignation. Silas watched her from a distance, his presence occasionally breaking the silence. He spoke little, his words chosen carefully, as if he feared the sound of his own voice would shatter the fragile peace they had found in their quiet companionship. When he did speak, each syllable resonated like a bell, a reminder of the life she had traded for this solace. The ranch was a kingdom of solitude, and Elowen felt like a phantom drifting through its halls. The land spread wide and wild, beckoning her to explore, but breeding a bittersweet longing for a world that felt distant and lost. She often found herself wandering the perimeter, tracing her fingertips along the fence posts and watching the horizon split open as the sky transitioned from fiery hues to soft pastels. The vastness mirrored her heart, both empty and yearning for something just beyond her reach, something she couldn't name. In the evenings, they would share meals that were sparse but nourishing. Silas's silence was less oppressive then, broken occasionally by stories of the ranch, tales that shaped the landscape and echoed through the seasons. Elowen listened intently, finding comfort in the rhythm of his voice, the way it softened as he spoke of the passing of time and the weight of loss he carried like a brand. Each story was a window into the man who had taken her in, revealing glimpses of a heart that mirrored her own, a heart steeped in sorrow but still flickering with resilience. Yet as the sun dipped below the horizon, unspoken words hung heavy between them. Elowen's longing for connection battled against the fear of breaking the brittle threads of their fragile coexistence. The shadows deepened, and with them came the creeping doubt that she would always remain a stranger in this land, a pale girl, forever marked by the past and a widow's burden. One fateful morning, as the sky blushed with the first light of day, Elowen awoke with a sense of restlessness thrumming in her veins. She dressed quickly, slipping from the confines of the ranch house into the cool embrace of dawn. The world outside was waking, birds chirping in the trees, the soft rustle of the grass underfoot calling her towards the horizon. In that moment, she felt a fierce yearning to escape, to reclaim the pieces of herself that remained lost. As the first rays of sunlight began to break over the ridge, Elowen took a deep breath, filled with wild possibilities. Silas's quiet strength was behind her, a ghostly presence in her mind, but she needed to find her own voice, to seize the day before it slipped away. With each step into the brightening world, she thought she could feel the chains of her past loosening, ready to fall away in the warmth of the new day. Unbeknownst to her, as she faded into the morning light, Silas stood still at the doorway, a shadow against the glow, watching her go and realizing that the pale girl who had entered his life was no longer just an echo of the past. She was a promise of what was yet to come. The sun had risen over the arid plains, painting the sky with hues of orange and gold, casting a warm glow on the worn wooden cabin where Silas had taken refuge from the vast, lonely world outside. Each morning followed a familiar rhythm, the sound of the kettle whistling, the creak of the floorboards beneath his heavy boots, and the distant whinny of the horses grazing outside. Elowen, with her pale complexion and fragile frame, would appear in the kitchen doorway, her hair catching the light like spun silver. Silas would watch her as she stirred the steaming porridge, the steam curling into the air like whispered secrets. Silas found himself drawn to her, watching as she carefully placed the bowls on the rough-hewn table, her fingers trembling slightly. She had filled the silence in his home, a void that had echoed since he lost his wife. He felt an unexpected warmth surge within him, an unfamiliar stir of emotions, something he had not allowed himself to feel in years. Yet, there was a fragility to their connection, a tension that hung in the air like an impending storm. Silas could sense she was more than just a girl, rescued from the clutches of a drunken father. She was a mystery that he couldn't quite unravel. Elowen's days were filled with chores, tending to the chickens, sweeping the porch, and caring for the horses that Silas had once trained with love. Through these routines, a rhythm emerged that felt almost familial, but there was an unspoken barrier, a hesitation that lingered between them. Silas often found himself watching her work, her graceful movements contrasting with the harshness of their surroundings. He longed to ask her about the scars of her past, the experiences that had shaped her into the pale girl sold for a few coins. Yet fear tethered his tongue. As they shared meals, the silence would stretch between them, heavy with unvoiced thoughts. Silas would sometimes catch a glimmer of sadness in Elowen's eyes, a flicker like lightning across a stormy sky. He wanted to reach out, to bridge the chasm that lay between their worlds, but the weight of his own grief held him back. How could he offer solace when his heart was still encased in the sorrow of memories that haunted him? Instead, he would turn his attention to the weathered grain of the table, tracing patterns with his fingers that echoed the complexity of his feelings. One evening, after a long day of work, Silas felt an urge to peel back the layers of her silence. He cleared his throat, the words struggling to break free. "You don't have to be afraid of me, Elowen," he murmured, watching her flinch slightly at his voice. "I want to understand, to help." She looked up, her blue eyes filled with an ocean of emotions, fear, uncertainty, perhaps a glimmer of hope. The air thickened with tension, the shadows growing long in the fading light. Elowen hesitated, the weight of her own secrets pressing down on her. "You don't know me," she replied softly, her voice barely above a whisper. "I am not someone to be saved." Silas could see the defiance in her, a flicker of strength that was both admirable and daunting. He wanted to assure her that he didn't see her as a burden, but the words felt trapped in the knot of emotions swirling within him. Instead, he nodded, feeling the distance grow palpable, as if their shared space was tainted by an unseen wall that neither could breach. Days turned into weeks, and the sun continued to rise and set, each day echoing the last. Silas watched as Elowen slowly began to emerge from her shell, sharing little glimpses of her past. A stolen smile here, a laugh there, even a tale about her childhood home that was as distant as a dream. Yet there were nights when shadows overtook her, and Silas would see her retreat into herself, mouth pressed into a tight line, eyes clouded with thoughts she wouldn't voice. The chasm between them widened, filled with unspoken fears and the vulnerability of life's unkindness. One morning, just as dawn broke and the soft light spilled into their cabin, Elowen was gone. Silas awoke to an empty room, the remnants of her presence lingering like the scent of wildflowers in the air. Panic surged through him, his heart pounding as he rushed outside, calling her name, the sound echoing across the vast emptiness of the plains. The quiet that followed was deafening, leaving him grappling with the unsettling reality that Elowen, the pale girl who had unwittingly sown threads of warmth into his life, had vanished without a trace. As sunlight poured over him, Silas stood frozen against the backdrop of the sprawling sky, his heart aching with the weight of loss. He felt an urgency to find her, to understand why she had slipped away like the night before dawn. With renewed determination coursing through him, he mounted his horse and rode out toward the horizon, the world stretching endlessly before him, each gallop a promise to reclaim what had been so carelessly lost, before the light of another sunrise could steal her from him forever. The sun had barely crested the horizon when Silas stepped out onto the porch, the wooden boards groaning beneath his weight. The chill of early morning enveloped him, a stark contrast to the warmth he had felt in Elowen's presence just hours earlier. He glanced back at the doorway, half expecting to see her pale face framed by the dull light of dawn. She had spent the night in the small room off the kitchen, and he had held his breath, fearing that at any moment she might vanish like a wisp of smoke, the shadows and memories of her past looming too closely behind her. His heart thrummed with an anxiety he couldn't shake as he pulled on his boots, the leather stiff against his legs. Silas had tried to reach out to her the evening before, sharing stories of the land, the cattle he tended, the life he had once known. It had been a fragile truce, each laugh they shared stitched together with the thread of unspoken fears. Silas had carefully skirted the edges of her pain, hoping she might feel safety blooming in the space between them. Yet even in their shared moments, something had remained unsaid, an ache that spiraled silently beneath the surface, waiting for its moment to break free. As he stepped into the light, Silas felt his breath hitch. She was standing by the battered fence, staring off at the dawn, breaking across the sprawling fields, the pale hues of pink and orange painting her figure in ethereal strokes. He approached her silently, not wanting to startle her. She looked so fragile, porcelain-like in the soft morning glow, her long hair tousled by the gentle breeze. For a moment, he saw not just the girl he had rescued from her father's grip, but a woman shaped by every loss and sorrow life had thrown in her path. "Elowen," he called softly, and she turned, her wide eyes carrying a storm of emotions. Fear and longing fought for dominance in that moment, and he could see it written on her face. She took a step back, as if trying to distance herself from the waves of memories crashing in, rising from the depths of despair. Silas felt a pang of guilt. He hadn't meant to intrude upon this sacred space where memories twisted and turned like the very branches of the oak tree beside them. "I was just thinking," she said, her voice barely above a whisper, laced with an undercurrent of despair, "about my father and where he is now." Ig. The admission hung in the air, heavy and real, like the earth after a rainstorm. Silas's heart clenched at the thought of what she had endured, imagining her father's drunken rage and the bitter cold of their home, so dissimilar to the warmth he tried to offer her. The reality of her past clawed at him like thorns, each revelation a reminder of the fragility of their connection. Silas took a careful step closer, closing the gap between them. There was an instinct to comfort her, but fear held him back. Would she allow it? "You're safe here, Elowen. I promise I'll protect you," he said, hoping to convey the depth of his sincerity. But instead of relief, her expression darkened. It was as if his words had struck a nerve, stirring feelings she had long buried. "Safe?" she echoed, laughter tinged with bitterness. "What does that even mean?" The sharpness of her response cut through the morning haze, leaving Silas momentarily reeling. He hadn't expected anger, hadn't prepared for the fire beneath her fragile exterior. Maybe he had misstepped, overstepped, without realizing the extent of the wounds within her. He looked away, frustration mingling with something deeper, a sense of helplessness. "I just want to help you," he whispered, wrestling with the weight of his own unspoken fears. "Help?" she scoffed, arms crossing defensively over her chest. "What do you know of help? You saved me from a man and brought me to a new cage. You think I can trust you?" The words struck him like a punch. In her gaze, he could see the flicker of desperation. She felt trapped, not saved. For a moment, Silas stood frozen, the harsh light of dawning realization seeping into his bones. Her vulnerability had taken form as a wall, and he had unwittingly pushed her to build it higher. Silas took another step, closing the distance further, arms open in an unassuming gesture, his heart multiple sizes too large for the pain unfolding. "Eluin, I know it's hard to believe, but I'm not your father. I'm not going anywhere." The conviction in his voice trembled with emotion as he bore the weight of her history. The tension lingered thick between them, shadows dancing as the first rays of light kissed the earth. In that moment, as her defenses wavered, Silas realized that perhaps vulnerability was not a weakness, but a bridge, one they could choose to cross together should she dare believe in safety once more. The air hung heavy with the scent of impending rain, a palpable tension crackling beneath the horizon. Silas stood at the edge of the newly planted garden behind the cabin, the earth dark and rich, waiting for the storm to arrive. His hands were calloused and worn, yet they moved with a tenderness as he knelt to inspect the seedlings. He couldn't recall the last time he'd cared for something so fragile. The thought of Elowen flickered through his mind, a ghost in the back of his consciousness, lingering like the fading light of dusk. Elowen emerged from the house, her silhouette framed by the dim glow of the kitchen. She held a glass of water, its surface disrupted by the restless breeze. Silas paused, caught between the urgency of the moment and the stillness that surrounded them. She walked towards him, her bare feet pressing against the moist earth with an almost ethereal grace. The world beyond the garden faded, leaving only the two of them, cocooned in the soft murmur of the wind and the distant rumble of thunder. As she approached, a shiver ran through Silas at the sight of her. The fabric of her dress, once billowing with the remnants of innocence, clung to her thin frame, a haunting reminder of her past. Yet there was a fire in her eyes, a spark that stirred something deep within him. She knelt beside him, mirroring his movements, as they studied the fragile green shoots pushing through the dark soil. For a heartbeat, they were just two souls, bound by the same earth, their burdens forgotten, in the quiet communion of the moment. "I've been thinking," Elowen said softly, her voice barely audible over the whispering wind, "about how things grow." Her gaze remained fixed on the seedlings, but Silas could see the intensity of her thoughts reflected in the way her brow furrowed slightly. "They don't need much, just a little water, some sunlight, and time. They find their way, no matter how dark it gets." Silas swallowed hard, her words reverberating within him, echoing the tumultuous journey they had both taken. He wanted to reach for her, to bridge the chasm of isolation that had settled firmly within him since the tragedy that had claimed his previous life. "It's not easy," Silas murmured, unsure whether his words were meant for her or for himself. "Not all of us can grow." Elowen turned her gaze towards him, her eyes wide and earnest, as if she could see the scars hidden beneath his skin. The weight of her gaze held him captive, challenging the fortress he had built around his heart. "Maybe we need someone to help us," she said, her voice barely more than a whisper. Silas felt the tension in the air shift, the storm clouds rolling in, as if mirroring the tempest of emotions brewing within him. He studied her face, the way her lips parted slightly, the way her brow tilted ever so slightly, as if she were daring him to understand the truth between them. It was not just compassion she offered. It was an invitation, a chance to forge a bond stronger than the wounds that had once threatened to consume him. As the first raindrops splattered against the earth, Elowen reached out, her fingers brushing against Silas's hand. It was a fleeting touch, yet it ignited a warmth that surged through his veins, igniting the embers of a long-dormant hope. He turned his hand slightly, their fingers briefly entwining before she withdrew, as if the weight of the moment was too profound to bear for long. But the connection lingered, a tether binding their fates together, a delicate thread woven in the fabric of a shared struggle. Silas exhaled slowly, the air thick with uncertainty and possibility. He could feel the storm drawing near, the rumble of thunder resonating like a heartbeat in the distance. "We can try," he said finally, his voice steady, resonating with a newfound determination. "I'll help you grow, Elowen. We can find our way, together." The words hung in the air like a promise, pulsing with the weight of their shared histories, poised on the brink of change. A smile broke across Elowen's face, radiant and shimmering like the first light of dawn breaking through the storm clouds. In that moment, he saw her not just as the pale girl who had appeared in his life by chance, but as a partner in the battle against their pasts. Their connection felt tangible, almost electric, as they turned to face the horizon together, ready to confront whatever storms lay ahead. Elowen woke to the faint light of dawn, creeping through the spaces in the wooden shutters, painting the room in soft hues of beige and gold. The remnants of last night's storm clung to the air, and the scent of damp earth tangled with the lingering warmth of Silas's presence. She lay still beneath the quilt, feeling the weight of her thoughts pressing down like the rain-soaked skies outside. The memories of their evening together swirled in her mind, the quiet conversations, the tenderness of his gaze, the way he seemed to understand her silences more than her words ever could. But as the first rays of sunlight spilled across the floor, a pulse of fear quickened within her. A fear not only of the world outside the cabin, but of the chasms opening inside her heart. Silas had been nothing but kind, offering her more than she had ever known in her short, turbulent life. Yet with every moment spent in his company, a disquiet crept closer, a truth she had been too terrified to confront. The comfort he provided now felt like a tether to a past she had barely begun to understand, and with each flicker of dawn, she could feel it pulling her back into the shadows. Silas stirred beside her, a soft groan escaping him as he turned, his rugged features softened by sleep. Elowen studied him, from the curl of his dark hair to the line of stubble on his jaw, and a pang of longing surged through her. She wanted to reach out, to let her fingers trace the maps of his scars, to speak the words that fluttered behind her lips like trapped birds. But the walls she had built were high and fortified, and every time she inhaled, The fear of abandonment latched onto her throat, squeezing tight. Silas's eyes fluttered open, and when they met hers, a light kindled within them, warm and honest. The silence between them felt charged, electric, inviting her to step into a space that frightened her. He shifted slightly, propping himself up on one elbow, concern flashing across his face. "Are you all right?" he asked, his voice gravelly but steady. It was the kind of question that could slice through the fog of her hesitation. She could feel the weight of it, heavy and tangible. Elowen opened her mouth, a gasp escaping as her throat constricted. The words clawed at her insides, desperate to be freed, yet she felt herself retreating beneath the quilt. She focused on the patterns interwoven in the fabric, tracing the lines with her eyes, as if they held the answers to her fears. She hated herself for being afraid of a kindness so pure, but the specter of her past loomed larger than the dawning day. The thought of rejection sent tremors through her core, the echoes of her father's betrayals still fresh, the whispers of unworthiness wrapped around her heart. I want to talk," she finally whispered, the admission escaping her lips like a flickering flame in the dark. The words fell short of their intent, almost lost in the currents of doubt that rushed back in. Her heart raced as she anticipated the distance that might grow between them. What if the truth he caught glimpse of in her downcast eyes drove him away? Her fingers twisted the fabric of the quilt, an anxious rhythm that marked the space between them. Silas leaned closer, his expression a mix of patience and understanding. "You can talk to me about anything, Elowen. I promise," he urged, his voice gentle yet firm, cradling her fears like fragile glass. "You're safe here." The simplicity of his words struck her, a lifeline thrown into her stormy sea. Was it possible to trust so completely? The question hung in the air, dancing like the light breaking through the clouds. In that moment, Elowen felt an unfamiliar warmth seep through her defenses, an inkling of hope, thin but present. The desire to share her truth surged again, stronger than the fear that tethered her. She swallowed hard, an ember igniting within her as she forced the words past her lips. "I was afraid you would leave, like everyone else." The confession tumbled out, raw and unrefined, unveiling the scars that she had thought were too deep to share. Silas's expression softened, concern etched across his features. He reached for her hand, his grip grounding as he held her gaze. "I'm not going anywhere, Elowen. Not now. Not ever." The sincerity in his voice melted the icy layers around her heart, and for the first time, she felt the weight of her silence begin to lift. As they sat together in the fragile light of dawn, Elowen realized that the journey ahead would be fraught with challenges. But she was ready. Silas's warm presence ignited a flicker of courage within her, urging her to step into the light and embrace the possibility of a new chapter, not only for herself but for them both. The wind swept through the valley, carrying the scent of damp earth and fading summer. Silas stood alone on the porch of the old ranch house, the morning sun draping a golden haze over the landscape. He gripped the wooden rail, splintered and rough against his calloused palms, as memories of Elowen flickered through his mind like fireflies in the dusk. Each moment they spent together played like scenes from a film, a tender montage of laughter, stolen glances, and whispered dreams. Yet with each passing day, the weight of her absence grew heavier, an unbearable ache that gnawed at his soul. In the cool light of dawn, Silas felt the familiar pull of hope and despair intertwining within him. He remembered her laughter, the way it danced through the air like a lullaby, wrapping itself around him, filling the empty spaces left by his lost wife. They had built something beautiful together, a bond forged in the fires of their shared pain and resilience. But as the sun rose, promising yet another day without her, the shadows of doubt crept closer, threatening to extinguish the flicker of joy Elowen had ignited in him. He turned his gaze toward the horizon, where the sky lightened into a canvas of pastel colors. Elowen had always marveled at sunrises, her eyes reflecting the brilliance of the world awakening. Silas could almost hear her voice, soft and melodic, painting dreams of their future under those vast, endless skies. Yet now, the silence rushed in, a cacophony of unspoken words and unfulfilled promises. His heart ached for her, an ache that transcended mere longing, an urgent whisper demanding she return to him. As the sun climbed higher, the ranch loomed larger, a world they had crafted together, filled with whispers of love and shared burdens. The barn stood stoic against the rising light, a silent witness to their journey. Elowen had helped him mend fences and tended to the horses with a gentle touch that breathed life back into weary bones. Silas's heart clenched at the thought. She had become his anchor in a storm-tossed sea, a pale girl, with the power to heal the deepest wounds, but the layers of grief wrapped tighter around him, suffocating in their intensity. He felt the loss as if it were a physical weight, pressing him down, making it hard to breathe. She had vanished at sunrise, taken by shadows of her own past, slipping through the fingers of his hope, just when he thought he had grasped her tightly enough. Silas squeezed his eyes shut, willing himself to breathe through the despair, to find the strength he needed to confront the emptiness that surrounded him. It was then, in the quiet urgency of his solitude, that a flash of determination ignited within him. He could not let another sunrise pass without searching for her, without pleading for her to return to the life they had begun to carve out together. With renewed vigor, he stepped off the porch and walked toward the fields, determination coursing through him as he called her name into the silence. Her name felt foreign on his tongue, a powerful invocation that summoned memories wrapped in joy and sorrow. "Elowen!" The sound reverberated against the stillness of the morning, a desperate plea that lingered in the air, touching the corners of the earth they once shared. The name cut through the haze of his uncertainty, beckoning the girl who had stolen his heart, the girl who had been lost to a world beyond his grasp. With each utterance, he dared to believe that the fabric of their bond could pull her back to him, could weave their destinies together again. As the vibrant colors of sunrise unfolded further, casting ethereal light across the land, he paused. Silas felt a tremor run through him. In that moment, he was no longer just a widowed cowboy, burdened by loss. He was a man willing to fight against fate, against the shadows that had stolen his light. The sun illuminated the path ahead, igniting hope where despair had once reigned. "Elowen," he whispered with an earnest heart, "I am here waiting for you." In that heartfelt utterance, buried deep within him was an echo of a promise. No matter how far she had gone, how lost she felt, he would always be there, standing against the dawn, enduring the grief to bring her home. And at that moment, the very air shimmered with possibility, as if the world itself held its breath, waiting for Elowen to answer. The sun dipped low, casting golden rays over the vast expanse of the field, each blade of grass shimmering like the fleeting memories they once shared. Silas stood at the edge of the land, eyes tracing the horizon where the earth kissed the sky. His heart ached with the weight of absence, a phantom echo of laughter that once danced in the air like the whispers of the wind. Elowen's silhouette appeared, fragile yet fierce, a ghost of the girl who once filled the silence with light. She paused, a mere breath away from the man who had sheltered her soul from the storm. The sun, a fiery orb, began its slow descent, casting elongated shadows that intertwined their pasts, a tapestry woven with grief and longing. Silas extended his hand, palm open, a silent offering of trust. Elowen, hesitant yet hopeful, reached out, fingers brushing against his, a fleeting connection that sparked warmth in the chill of twilight. The world around them held its breath, nature swaying gently as if honoring the moment. As the last sliver of sun disappeared, they stood together, the silence wrapping around them like a forgotten promise, both knowing that sometimes love is found not in words, but in the quiet spaces between.